Good afternoon and welcome to our Retention Academy Planning and Strategies Behavioral Health Edition. Wow, that is a mouthful to say. Well, welcome back. We had an off week last week for the Thanksgiving holiday, so hope you all enjoyed some time with your family and just some time reflecting on all that is good in the wonderful country that we live. So welcome back. My name is Suzanne Spear. I'm the Director of Workforce Development here at ACU. And today we are switching gears. So the last 3 weeks, we talked about retention planning and planning for retention and how some strategies that you can put into place for retention, some planning that you can do in order to increase your retention. Apologize, getting ahead of myself. And today we're switching gears and we are very excited because we are going to start 3 weeks worth of guest speakers. So we've got some experts that are coming to talk to you about different strategies that you can utilize for retention. So today we have with us Michelle Varcho, and she is the Director of Education Outreach at 3RNet. Michelle is a great friend of ACU and the STAR Center, and she's a veteran working with health centers. She was with a health center for a while, and now she works with 3RNet, which is the Rural Recruitment and Retention Network. If you're not familiar with 3RNet, they do a lot of great work, and we hope that you'll check out all the things that they have to offer too. So anyway, we're super excited to have Michelle talking to us today about interviewing for retention, specifically about behavioral health providers. But it's really important. Just as I've mentioned before in previous broadcasts, these techniques, the plan and also the strategies can apply to other providers as well. So, we're kind of focusing on behavioral health providers with the series, but keep in mind that it can apply across the board. So we're excited to have Michelle here with us. Just a few webinar housekeeping items. We are recording this webinar, so it will also be posted if you want to go back and listen to it again, or either came in late or have to jump off early. You can go and listen to it. We're going to be putting it on the discussion board, so feel free to check it out there. You can ask questions as we go. You can either put those in the chat or the questions box, and we will be monitoring those at the end of the presentation. So go ahead and if things come up as we go along, as Michelle goes along, feel free to put those either in either of those places, and we will make sure that they get answered for you. Again, if you have a question, put those there. If you have any technical difficulties, please email Mariah at mblake@clinicians.org, and she will get you pointed in the right direction. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Michelle Varcho, and she is going to take it away.
Thanks, Suzanne. Okay, so let's get into it. I love this quote because I think that it really kind of nails hiring or interviewing right down to it. Hiring the right people takes time, the right questions, and a healthy dose of curiosity. And I think that this is kind of the essence of what we're going to talk about today. So when we're talking about interviewing for behavioral health, and this is actually strategies that we can use for any type of physician, but there's a couple of things in here that are more important for behavioral health than they are maybe in any other medical professions. Not necessarily that they're not relevant to other healthcare professions, but that they are probably we're ranking them, they're going to be a little bit higher, a little bit more important on behavioral health. So the first thing we always talk about is selling your position, okay? So whenever, and you're thinking about when you're doing your interview, it's like, well, before you even get into the interview piece of it, you need to be looking all the way back to the posting itself and selling your position. And so we're going to talk about this a little bit more in another slide, but we talk about belonging, fulfillment, esteem, and prosperity. And these are all questions that you can use to sell your position. And these are also 4 topics that we will talk about whenever you're creating your interview questions as well. We want you to be creative in your job post or in your posting, in your job ad. I am a big proponent, and if any of you have ever heard me speak before, I'm really big on please do not use a job description. Normally, we don't have time today, but normally I would have you take out your phone and pull up one of your job ads and look at it on your phone. And is it just a standard job description? And is that going to glean out? Mobile phones is how everybody is looking at job positions nowadays. If they've got an extra 5 minutes, if somebody's already employed and they got an extra 5 minutes, they're looking at a job on their phone. And how friendly is your ad to someone looking on the phone? Mobile phones have made us really lazy readers. And so we just want information quick and fast. So be creative with your postings. And I'll talk about that just a touch more when I'm talking about selling your position. So be creative in your interview questions. So this is something that this whole talk that I'm having today is about, is talking about those interview questions and how you can glean out information from people and get down to the heart of what you really need and what they need. The 4th point I've got up here is follow your gut. How many times have you been interviewing someone and they gave you all the right answers, but something just felt off? And when you went back to your team afterwards, someone may have said, well, we can hire them. I think I could work with them. I think it'll work out. Is that really the kind of hire that you want? Is that going to lead to retention down the road if it's someone that you think you can make work? So a lot of times we tend to want to analyze things and put it in black and white terms, but I always say follow your gut. I think sometimes it knows. Another one that is a good strategy, and I know this is really hard sometimes because you're just desperate to fill the position, but don't hire just to fill the position. You're not helping your patients, you're not helping the other employees, and you're not helping your organization by rushing to hire. I heard a statistic just yesterday. It costs around $88,000 is what a turnover is for a nurse. And it's anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million to replace a provider. And this is what your turnover cost is. So think about it. Don't rush that position. Don't just put a body in there because you're desperate to have someone. It's not going to help in the long run. This is a piece, this point right here, creating a culture of safety, is one that is very important in the behavioral health world. This is really important to any employee, but it's more so in the behavioral health world with the types of challenges that they face, creating a culture of safety. We'll talk about that some more. The other thing, so that's what's important to the employee, that create a culture of safety in behavioral health. That's something that's important to the employee. Something that should be important to the employer is empathy. This is something in behavioral health. You can train to a job, but you can't teach empathy. And in the behavioral health world, it's really in all of our world, in any healthcare world, empathy is there, but very much so in the behavioral health world. And then the last bullet I'll talk about is a little bit more of a retention strategy, but starts back and all the way back into your recruitment piece of it, your interviewing piece of it, is transparency and communication. And we'll talk some more about communication here in a minute. So I have a question for you. When does retention start? Does it start at orientation? Does it really start after the probation period? You know they're going to stay. Does it start during recruitment, or does it start, you think, at the interview? If you guys just take a minute and click on one of these. We'll leave it open just for a second. All righty. Mariah, if you wouldn't mind sharing those results, that would be fabulous.
Sure. We had 75% of our responses said during recruitment and 25% said at the interview.
Okay, great. Well, it really starts, most of you are right, it really starts at the recruitment. And when we say that, when I say at the recruitment, what I mean by that is, are you taking the time to assess your need? And we're going to talk about this a little bit more. Are you talking about, are you assessing your need, what each person needs within the organization, what the organization needs? Have you got a budget? All of these things will lead to retention later on. And then at the interview, that is really where you can hone in, though, and figure out if it's a good fit for you. If you do a little planning before, your retention can start then, and then at the interview is definitely the kickoff. Okay, so earlier I talked a little bit about selling your position, and so we talked about what your candidates need. So in today's world, competition, which I know I'm speaking to the choir here, preach to the choir, competition is really fierce right now. And so all of your communication needs to be candidate driven, okay? And what does that mean? Well, candidates, what are they looking for? They're looking for belonging. Are they the kind of person you're looking for? They're looking for fulfillment. Will I be content? How will I feel about myself in this role? Esteem, will I be respected? How do others feel about me? And then prosperity, will I thrive? So these are something that anybody would want. Think about yourself in your position right now. Think about when you were interviewing to go to work for your company. How did you feel? Did you want these questions answered? Okay, and how did they answer them for you? So what you can communicate, how you can answer them is talk about your story. Talk about your health center story, how it was established, where it came from. Your current employees, I cannot say this enough. Having testimonial from your current employees, especially providers, is very, very key, a very, very good strategy to have. And then your teamwork. How does your team get along? Do you have one of the best employee satisfaction out of all of your community health centers in your area? What does that mean? When we're talking fulfillment, quality of care. Do you have high patient satisfaction? Are you proud of what you are? Clinical autonomy. Do your providers feel like they are able to do what they went to school to do? What they want, how they want to practice their skills? Are they able to do that? And then this is a big one, especially in our world, making a difference. You need to make sure that people are mission driven and that they get excited and that it fills up their gas tank, so to speak, in making a difference. Esteem, clinical leadership. How is the leadership there? Is it a good place to work? Are you an employer of choice? Does the community respect you? Accomplishments of the organization. Have you gotten any kind of awards, those type of things. And then another thing on a kind of a personal level for your people would be opportunities to teach or mentor. How can they give back to someone else in their field? And then the final piece, of course, is prosperity, loan repayment, competitive pay, any unique benefits that they have. And I always give a shout out, on those benefits. I'm a big proponent of finding something unique that you can do. For example, I always give the example, my FQHC, our area is really big on hunting and fishing. And so we paid for hunting and fishing license for whoever wanted them. And then we also, if there was a particular thing that they were interested in, deer season, trout season, the opening day, we made sure that their schedules were so that they could have that day off. So it's one thing to give them a fishing license, but you kind of need to follow that up with time off, time away from work, so that they can enjoy it. Okay, so now that you've kind of got in your mind what your candidate's doing, you're trying to establish some communication, and you would put those type of things within your job ad, but you would also put them within the interview questions too. And now that we've looked at kind of what's important to the candidate, I want you to also take the time to figure out what's important to the organization and the team. So what are the needs of the organization? Do you need a full-time social worker? Do you need a 1.5-time social worker? What is it that the organization itself needs? And then you need to go even a step further. What's important to the hiring manager? What are they looking for? Are they looking for somebody that could step up and be a lead? Are they looking for somebody, you're having to replace somebody, your most seasoned person has finally retired and you need somebody to fill those shoes? What's important to the team? Did the team have a really cohesive little group and now they've lost one of their beloved, one of their beloved teammates? And what does it feel like to them? What do they need? Patients. That's another person you've got to think of. What do the patients need? What kind of services are they needing? Are they wanting? And then again, what we talked about on the previous page was candidates. What is it that the candidates want? So all of this needs to be thought through before you even do the interview. Some more points to think about. Is everybody on board? Do you have your board of directors on board with the hire? Is the administration on board? Are the fellow providers on board? Is the team on board? Do you have everybody's buy-in? Think about that. If you have, I always give the example, we had a pediatrician and she was just getting really overworked and we could see that she was getting burned out and we wanted to bring on another part-time pediatrician, but in her mind, she didn't need the help. And of course, she was going to be part of the interview process. How do we think that would have went if we hadn't got her to buy in? Would it have been a great interview? How would the candidate have felt? Would they have had a warm reception from her? Probably not. So again, or even if they come on board and she still didn't want them there, how long would we have retained that? So these are things you got to make sure is everybody on board. The other piece we talk about is the interview team prepped. In other words, do they know this person's background? Have they had a copy of their CV? Are they know what the goal is, that this is who we're wanting to hire, we're wanting to hire them full time? Do they know anything about the candidate or the candidate's family so that they can give suggestions to make the candidate feel like it's a good place for them? This third piece, communication preferences have been established. I put this in there. This is something that we've just added recently. Communication is such a big thing, right? It's what everything hinges on, is how we communicate. But now we have so many different generations in the workforce. You need to understand how someone wants to be communicated with. So, for example, in our organization, my boss, Mike Shimmons, really prefers a phone call. He wants to be spoken to one-on-one. I prefer email because it's more direct and to the point. And then our two other coworkers prefer just a text. They don't want a call or an email. They just want you to text. So it's really important in today's world of recruitment and retention to figure out that communication preference and make sure it's established. And then the final piece, of course, is it's kind of a shame if you went through all the work to get all of this established and you don't have your next steps or any follow-up done. So you go through an interview, you have a great interview, but then you take forever to follow up with someone because you don't know beforehand what you were going to offer them, or you don't have a contract in place, or you haven't completely decided if you wanted full-time or part-time. And so if you need to make sure that all of your follow-up, who's going to communicate what, what's the timeline going to be, and then are all of our ducks in a row? So if this person does come on board the first day, are we ready for them? Are we going to have everything that they need, their computer, their desk, their lab coat, whatever, their passwords, making sure that everything is lined up and that the follow-up is established. Okay, so I have another polling question for you. I'd like to know which of these best describes your interview style. It can be a team-based interview, which is standard questions. It could be not formal. You just kind of let the interview develop organically. You could do a lot of one-on-one with team members with their own questions, or is it possibly a combination of all three? Give everybody a moment to answer.
All right, it looks like we received 40% of our responses say one-on-one interviews with team members, and 60% say a combination of all three.
Nice, okay. And I would say that a combination of all three is probably the best option, depending on what position you're interviewing, what's going on within your organization, what exactly your needs are. So that would seem appropriate. So one of the things I'm going to talk about today is behavioral interviewing. And I think behavioral interviewing is just a really great way to get into, are they a fit for my organization? Like, are they a good cultural fit? And we've found that behavioral interviewing, the whole premise behind it is the past is your best predictor of future behavior. So what they've maybe done in the past is going to tell you how they would behave in your situation. Another thing I really like about it, it minimizes that halo effect and subjectivity. You know, that they say one thing, or it's so less opinion based. And again, it collects more of a meaningful information about the person. You really get a true understanding of what they've done. Okay, so when you're doing behavior-based interviewing, you want to couch your questions in a certain way, okay? So when you're doing behavior-based, it's more than just open-ended questions, okay? It's not something that you're just going to do yes or no answers. And usually they start with something about, tell me about a time, or describe for me, or give me an example of. Again, you're trying to get them to tell you something that they have done in the past. Now, when you're doing behavior-based interviewing, there's a number of things that you need to keep in mind. And my bottom line right here, I said, ask for a specific example of the situation or task, learn the action, and then get the result. So you want all three of those things. It's really important, too, when someone's giving you an answer, that you make sure that they're answering what they have specifically done. Sometimes whenever you'll be interviewing, like, someone has a tendency to say, oh, always. But they're saying we always. You need to stop and say, I'm sorry, I really want to know about what you did specifically in that situation. And so when we have, and so at this point, I think Anne's on the line. Anne, are you still with us?
I am still with you.
Awesome.
Can you hear me?
Yes. So Anne has agreed, Anne Hoven is agreed to do a little bit of a mock interview with me today. So we're going to, Anne is not a social worker, but she's going to pretend for the purpose of this interview that she's a social worker, and that that's the position that I'm hiring her for. Okay?
And this has not been rehearsed.
This has not been rehearsed. Anne literally found out 27 minutes ago that she would be doing this. So thank you so much, Anne, for being such a good sport and doing this with me. So I would start out the interview just like, hi, Anne, welcome. I'm so glad you could come in today.
Oh, that was so nice of you, Michelle. I'm so glad to be here.
Well, good. Well, let's dive right into it. And I'd like to talk a little bit about your work history. So if you could, can you tell me about a time when you had a difficult patient?
Oh, a difficult patient. I just love all my patients. All my patients have always been just wonderful over the years.
That's amazing. So you've never had a time when you've had to deal with a difficult patient? Every patient's been compliant?
Oh, well, compliant, no, not compliant. You know, there are some patients that either they just can't make it. You know,
that I will say is difficult for me when they cannot make their appointments or they have to constantly reschedule. That's really difficult because I've given them all the tools they need, to make these changes in their life, and then they just kind of don't make it a priority and don't show up. And I'd say that bothers me a lot.
And have you ever been involved in any trying to find a solution for those type of situations?
Well, yes. I mean, I've always worked in, private practice and things, and I'm just hoping that being in a community health center, maybe some of those same challenges don't exist, because it's just really hard to help people that don't want help. And so I guess that's the way I look at it, is I try to help them. And but so I think that being in a community health center, though, would be really good, because you've got the resources so people can use those for transportation purposes. I love your mission. I think the mission's wonderful, and it's an integrated care team. And so that's what I'm looking for. I think that it'll be much better. And I won't have as difficult patients as I do in the practice that I'm in now.
Okay. So tell me about a time then, if you haven't had a difficult patient, have you ever had a fellow peer, like another social worker or another staff member that you've had a difficult time with?
Well, I think that my team that I've always worked with is wonderful. But yeah, there are some times where, I just don't think that they're necessarily helping the patient as much as they should be. During peer review and things, we just talk, and I think they could probably do things differently.
Can you give me a specific example?
Well, it's just when someone doesn't know, as much as has the experience that I have in social work, when we get someone new, it can be really hard. They just don't have the skills necessary to really talk through behavioral change with that patient. And sometimes they make judgments about people instead of actually helping them. And so that's really hard for me when I see that happening with one of my coworkers, especially someone who's not as experienced as I am. And so, yeah, I try to bring it up, but I don't want to ruffle any feathers. I just want to come in and do my job.
So can you tell me about a time when you had more experience and someone else had less experience? How would you have handled the situation different? What was the situation, and how would you have handled it different?
Oh, because I had more experience? Well, I think that, oftentimes, even clinical providers, don't always look at all the behavioral aspects that go into seeing a patient. And so, I have to come in and step in and help out that entire team, because that's my expertise.
Can you give me a specific instance of that?
Yeah, we had a integrated team model at this practice that I'm at currently, and we meet every day. And there was a situation just last week where someone came in and they were in a crisis, and they came to get me, and I was able to assist them with some resources. We did have a medical evaluation for them, and but the biggest change that we were able to do is we were able to get them to a shelter and get the resources they need, whether it be food and transportation, and get them into seeing myself and also a clinical psychologist to help them through some of the issues that they have in their life currently. So that was a huge win for us. Excellent,
excellent. Thank you. One last question. Tell me about a time when you didn't agree with management's directive on patient care.
Management. Well, I think sometimes, I'm such a team player, and I really do support management and things, but sometimes management doesn't have the clinical experience, and so sometimes they come up with like policies or rules that are just a little bit difficult for us in the medical side to see the reasoning.
Okay.
And so I guess if I have to give you an example, if I have to give you an example, I would say, you know, having so many patients per day, because it just makes it hard, especially in social work, because we're not just in and out of their office, and you know, we just don't do a few tests on people. We certainly sit down and talk with people, and so that makes it difficult. So sometimes just the demands of having that many patients a day that we need to see. But otherwise, I think that management, you know, they have a role in the organization, and admin needs to be there, obviously. So I can work with them.
So when you're having like too many patients in a day, how do you, what action do you take on that? How do you handle that? Well,
if I have, you know, I have, like, again, I said, I love my patients and do anything for them. It's just a matter of, we just need more help. We need more support because oftentimes there's only myself in the office, and once in a while we have our clinical psychologist, like I mentioned, that comes in. But we just have, you know, there's obviously more patients than we can actually see. But I guess, how do I address it with management? I've expressed like our concerns with our clinic manager, and we are trying to implement some changes so that we can maybe start group visits, things like that. We're exploring some different ideas, so I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you so much, Anne. Seriously, I would hire you as a social worker. You did really great on answering the questions. Thank you so much for doing that. I appreciate that. So what Anne and I were trying to do here, what I was trying to get to is, you notice I kept asking, can you give me a specific example of a situation? What action was taken? What result? What was the result? And I would have went on with my question. She had talked about making changes. I would have asked for specific examples of the change and what role she played in that change and what was the result of that change. That's the whole point we're trying to get to, is you really want to know specific examples of a situation that person did. And in Anne's case, she's not really ever been a social worker, so it's probably really hard for her to come up with specific examples. But thank you, and you really did an awesome job. But the basis I'm trying to get to on behavioral interviewing, if you really want a predictor of what they would be like in the future, you really have to get into some specific examples. And you just keep coming back to that same kind of pattern of, give me a specific example of that situation. Give me what was the result. That is always, you always want to know a result when it comes to that. So I believe everyone can answer in the chat box. Is that correct, Mariah?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, so right now, if everyone could just let me know if you would have hired Anne for that position, yes or no. Did you think you got information out of her?
Do I get to answer that too?
Yes. I already said my vote. Yes, I would hire.
All right, everybody can go ahead and pop their responses there into the chat box. It should be in the right-hand side in your GoToWebinar control panel. All right, we had just one yes come in the questions box. Thank you.
Michelle, can I add something to that? Since I
absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm thankful that the two of you would hire me. And I do think that, and this was just a role play at the last kind of minute here, but there was a couple things that, if you're doing an interview like Michelle was, is that I did have a couple things that I said that normally you'd have to explore a little bit further. Yeah, I threw up some red flags.
And the reason,
yeah,
the reason I didn't press on it is because you weren't an actual, so I felt like I didn't want to make you get into answers that you're like, I don't technically understand. So there were some red flags. You know, whenever Ann made the comment about all my patients are great, I never have a bad patient. That is a very typical answer of social workers I have found in my years of interviewing them. They always, and that is something that's good. So it was really interesting with Ann's answers in that you saw that she liked that patient population. She likes that patient population. She likes her type of work. Okay, that was what that answer said to me. But then a little bit later when she said, I can only help them if they can help themselves. That, to me, I'm actually glad you brought that up, Ann, because that was a point I wanted to make. That showed to me she didn't have much empathy. And that was a great way to figure out, you need to make sure that your questioning are going to show you if this person has empathy for your patient population. And to me, that led a little bit of, she doesn't have enough empathy for our patient population. And I don't know that she would be a great hire because of that particular thing. And what would you want to add, Ann? I'm sorry, I think I interrupted you.
No, that's exactly it. That's exactly why I threw those in. So yeah.
Great.
Yeah. And maybe someone else had something else that I threw up, but I think that, yeah, behavioral interviewing can be an excellent tool.
Yeah. Okay. I think, I don't know that my controls, oh, here we go. So again, thank you, Ann, for that. And thank you for the person that responded and said they would hire her. My last question I want you to think about when you're interviewing, okay? And when you're talking about, you know, I talked about you need to sell your job, you need to think about from a candidate's perspective, what is it that you have to offer? What is it that you can answer for them in the interview questions? You can even tailor some of your interview questions, you know, when you're wanting to know if they're a good fit for you, you can also address some of their things, such as leadership. Like if you're needing a leader, that's fulfillment for them, right? If they're wanting to be in a leader role, or if you're needing somebody to take on teaching or mentoring. So you can also use those 4 factors in your interview questions as well. But another thing that I talk about with employee testimonials is don't forget about yourself. Like, why do you work there? Why do you stay there? And think about that, and think about your own hiring experience, your own interview experience. What about it would you have changed if you could? And then I think that's a question you should also be asking your employees. What did you like about our interview process? What would you have changed about our interview process? Were there any questions that you felt were important that we didn't ask? Or what questions did you think really helped you? What did we tell you about us that really was kind of a hook for you, or that you were like, yes, I like that. That's going to help me make my decision. Make sure you're talking to your own employees on this, and so that they know, again, they're one of your best resources. And again, that question, why do you work there? And make sure you're communicating your own reasonings. Is it because you really love your team and you guys get along really great? And I ask this question a lot at my presentations, why do you work there? And I hear a whole lot about the mission, and that is great. But a mission, the mission is a good piece because you want to help others. But ultimately, the mission can only happen if there's good leadership, if there's good teams, if there's good processes in place. Then the mission is accomplished, right? So it has to be more than just the mission. Okay, so my last few minutes here, let's do my main takeaways. The things I wanted you to really glean from today was, remember that competition is fierce, so your communication needs to be candidate driven. Having empathy is a critical skill your candidate needs to be successful in meeting the needs in behavioral health. Having a culture of safety is needed for the candidate to thrive in your organization. They need to be able to come to work every day and know that they are safe and that they can perform their job and do what they need to do free from harm. And then another thing is show value for the person. And that's, again, part of a retention, but it's very, very important that each person feels their value, that they know how they contribute to the mission and how they as an individual are valued within the organization. And that can be done in a number of different ways. You can do that through total compensation worksheets. You can do that through stay interviews. You can do that through career ladders. There's a lot of different ways to do that, but just make sure that you're thinking about those concepts. And then the last piece, leadership and supervision are key components of retention. We actually, Dr. Don Passman did a 20-year study, and he found that leadership was one of the top reasons, the number one reason actually, that providers stay within an organization. And then your direct supervisor will, of course, have the full impact on whether someone stays. If they have loyalty to their direct supervisor, that's another key component. And I think that was all I had for today.
Great. Yes. Thank you so much, Michelle, and also Anne, too. It's kind of a fun way to break up the typical webinar with a live mock interview with us today. So again, thank you to Michelle for presenting on interviewing today. I know a lot of times that we don't think about the interview process is something that could be a strategy for retention. So, but when you're thinking about your overall retention strategies and your planning too, make sure you're incorporating this into it. It's really important. And, getting the right candidates is, in order to get the candidates that are the best fit for your health center, you really need to have a solid interview process that Michelle went over today. And especially when it comes to those behavioral interview questions. They can really tell you a lot about a person, as Michelle said, and a lot of people are going towards them and have gone towards them, but just keep that in mind as you're interviewing candidates for any position at your health center. So we're going to have some questions for Michelle, or really anyone on the line today, about like questions, any questions that you have about her presentation. You can put those either in the chat box or in the questions section. You can do that. While we're waiting for those to come in, for folks to type those out, what is next for us? So go ahead and answer those. We have some discussion board questions for you. So go in and check those out. See, and again, there are no wrong answers on the discussion board. So these are just to get you doing a little bit deeper dive with some of the things that you are, we've talked about today, and to sort of get you thinking about. And then our next webinar is going to be next week on December 5th at 3 o'clock. And we are going to be having someone from High Tech talk to us about the role of EMR and how you can use that for your retention purposes. So we had a question come in, and it says, the labor market is so tight for licensed behavioral health providers, it's difficult not to overlook some of the negatives. For example, job hopping. In this market, is this still considered a deterrent? That's a great question.
I would actually, and please feel free to jump in as well with your opinion. I don't feel like job hopping is a detriment in today's world. It's really how the newly graduated and fairly newly graduated have found, it's how they've gotten into the positions that they want. It's how they've gained experience. Job hopping. What do you think, Ann?
I would agree with that. And I would just say, you know, what is the hopping look like, right? Is it like they're progressing, or that, you know, if they've all been less than a year, maybe they're not going to work out. But certainly if it's been a year and a half at this organization and they, you know, change because for a large organization, or now they've really determined that they want community health, you know, it's worth exploring. I would not set the resume aside by any stretch of the imagination. The generation now knows that they will have many, many, many more jobs than certainly us that are in the middle age group or getting older age group, and certainly not like our parents who never changed jobs. So it is something that's just a reality. Mm-hmm.
And it's something, I agree with Ann, I wouldn't set that resume aside. And if you brought them in for an interview, I definitely would explore it within your interview questions or even your pre-screening.
Thanks, you guys. That's, like I said, that's a great question, and things are definitely changing. You know, as Ann alluded to, things the way they even were, you know, 10 years ago, it's very different, but I think it's definitely a relevant question and something to think about as well. I'll give just a few more seconds to, if anyone has any other questions, feel free to put them in the question or chat box and we will get them answered. You know, again, thank you so much for your time today, Michelle, and also Ann, for this today. And doesn't look like there are any other questions. So you guys get 10 minutes back in your day. Thanks so much for joining us. Don't forget to log into the discussion board. If you don't have your login or you've lost it, email Mariah at mblake@chcworkforce.org and excuse me, at clinicians.org, and she'll get that with you. If you can't find her email, you can always email info@chcworkforce.org. That's the one I was thinking of. So anyway, so thanks again for joining us today, everybody, and we will see you next week. Take care.
Thank you.